Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are
I'm
you?
all right. I'm all right ish. I'm all right ish. Admittedly. I'm a bit tired today. Do you know what I heard one of the things about us, like when we were out in there working on the front line, um,
Yeah.
is that sometimes we hear of incidences, and when the incidences hit you, and when you hear about the incidences, they can sometimes impact you in quite a way. So
Yeah.
I heard of a young man in our community who was a victim of a shooting yesterday, and hearing that kind of disturbed my sleep. So
Oh,
the
bless
bag,
you.
the bags, but it's a bit of a broken sleep,
Mm.
drinking my coffee. Um,
Yeah,
but you know what? It's kind of like one of them. Um, but this is the realities of the topic today, isn't it? Really?
this is it. And this is just like you said, I'm glad you even pointed that out because ultimately, we can't live in this disbelief that the trauma of the young people that we work with does not affect us.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
But we'll get onto that a bit in a bit.
Uh,
Earlier,
you know, this conversation, I'm just warning you from now, Darren, this conversation's gonna go there and there and there.
and
But you just gotta pull me back in.
okay, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. But I think I think for us today, I think it's very important for us to understand that this may bring up some stuff that's quite heavy for us, and there may be a few aha moments for people. It's going to be very challenging. Do you know what I mean? And but yeah, we're here, and this is the point. Difficult conversations need to be had.
Yeah, someone's got to do it.
Exactly, exactly. So these difficult conversations need to be had, and we're having them. And you can always catch these difficult conversations every Wednesday on Instagram Live.
Hello.
Got people and my partners. I'm telling you, and yeah,
Oh,
this is where it's
definitely.
at. So where we at? We at 2 minutes past. Do you know what I had to do? I had to order some elderberry juice. Um,
Okay.
yeah, because one of my friends, Caprice from Gaia's Garden, um, was telling us about the benefits of it. So she produces this
Yeah.
elderberry juice, and it's mad. It's like anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, anti-viral, anti this, anti that,
Yeah.
anti cholesterol. A lot of the stuff helps regulate weight. It's just really good for boosting the immune system and stuff. So I just had to shout that. I'm waiting for my delivery now.
You know what the joke is? We talk about like trauma and we're going to talk about mental health and stuff, but the amount that our diet impacts us, and I say this putting my hand up that I know there are healthy foods I should be eating. I know that there are healthy things that I should be drinking. However, it's not always easy.
No, it isn't.
But
And sometimes you just want some chocolate. And
we
it's
do, we
simple as,
do. Or
and
some
yeah,
good old fish and chips.
or whatever, whatever things can bring you comfort. But that's all good. I don't think it's
Sorry,
bad.
but
Huh?
for anyone that's fasting, I apologize about the food conversation.
Mm-hmm. Back
Sorry.
to go.
And I'm grateful that you've joined us at this time because I know obviously you're still on your no food fasting time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Oh,
Right then. So where do we start? So for me, um, Nadia, right? Thank you for joining us. All right.
you're welcome.
Um, who is Nadia?
Woof. That's gonna take the whole hour, you know. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna cut it down. Right. Nadia is a Handsworth born youth worker.
Uh-huh.
Um, I've been working with young people for 23 years. Obviously, that shows my age. And I've worked from just doing basic youth work and drama. And I remember I first started up in Ladywood. So coming across like some of I think like I came across Naomi, whose daughter I used to work with. And it's things like that. So I used to work in Ladywood in Handsworth. I currently am the founder of Mind Our Mentalities. And I say that because that's the newest part of me. I've worked in education, I've worked in schools, I've been a head of year 11, I've been a learning and behavioural specialist, I've done a lot of work around special educational needs. I am also a lived experience practitioner, as we would entitle them now.
Yes.
But before I was experiencing my lived part of it, I've been working in youth work and the industry for quite some time. So just passionate about young people, passionate about helping them, and also passionate about helping parents. Because, sorry, if my reception goes, I'll take the blame for it. I don't know if anyone else is having Wi-Fi issues in Handsworth, but it's atrocious. Okay. Oh my God, my college teacher. Hey, sorry. This is what I'm saying, but this is what I'm saying. It's about that impact that we have. So ultimately, my aim is to work with young people to help them become better. But the other part of it is parenting, because I say this a lot. I have a 7-year-old, and 7 years ago, I was the perfect parent. And I know that doesn't exist, but before I had my son, parenting was so much easier. And then we have children, and it's not always easy, and it's definitely not always easy to actually put your hand up and say, you know what, I need help managing my own child or supporting my own child. But I believe it's those parents that are the positive parents. It's the parents that can actually say, well, you know, I don't know this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to start. And particularly if we look at trauma, I don't know the first thing about how I support my son or daughter with a traumatic event that they've been through. So, and it's okay as a parent. That's the first thing I want to say, or feel like I need to say. It is okay to not know what you are doing. It's about what you do with that. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So the topic as it is, I managed to work out how to pin the topic: trauma and parenting, and how trauma impacts our children.
Yeah.
So I think, do you know what? I think it's only right. Some people have varied knowledge of trauma. What, you know, tell us a bit about what trauma is.
Right. So we know, most of us will know trauma as being some form of epic, life-altering experience. And if you look at the definitions, a lot of the time it's associated with the loss of maybe a child, or a child's loss of a parent. We talk about traumatic car accidents. We talk about traumatic deaths. But that trauma does not cover the range that we need to these days, because trauma is about, it's not just about the person that was affected or the person that experienced it. It's about the people witnessing it. Trauma could be witnessing someone being killed or injured.
Yes.
Trauma could be, and I know that that's one of the places you want to go later on, the impact of us seeing trauma sometimes on a daily basis, or living in traumatic environments. So it's not just, right, my mom died in a car accident. That's not, my mom didn't actually die, she's alive. But as an example, it's not just that. It's not just that I lost my parent at the age of 15. We talk about abuse and traumatic experiences, and sexual abuse, and witnessing domestic violence. The person does not have to experience trauma from that. And we could then go on to talk about how secondary trauma how secondary trauma affects us, because you could experience trauma from supporting somebody that you're trying to help through their trauma. So it's so vast. It's like, and then we can go into looking at ACEs, and I'm gonna try and be inclusive and try and unpick any abbreviations I use during this, because I know that sometimes there's people watching and to them, they're thinking, well, what are you on about? So obviously you look at adverse childhood experiences and how many young people are experiencing those these days, and it's close to 50% of young people that have experienced at least or been in a position of experiencing an adverse childhood experience. So the trauma that can come from that alone, it's massive.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I love the fact that you've pinpointed that there's various different types of trauma, and I think for many people they've only learned it on their journey. That even helping others can have its impact on yourself. Yeah. But it's not really until you kind of understand what trauma itself is. Then you know, once you know you're forewarned, you're forearmed, you know better, you do better. And these are the sort of things that kind of help us, because then you can do something about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you do try, and even then, I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, where we might be informed about something, but we don't necessarily associate ourselves with what we've been informed about. Okay. So it's about giving yourself that time to process that. And I think within youth work, we talk regularly and teaching about becoming reflective practitioners. We have to reflect on things. We have to reflect on why we do what we do, what impact that has, how we can do things differently. And part of that would be unpicking whether we have or do experience trauma. Yeah. So I think it only occurred to me about some of the trauma I might have lived through when I started thinking, wow, if a young person had gone through some of the things that I went through in today's day and age, there'd be all sorts of services like knocking on my door. And so it's sometimes, and you can't go back to that, but it's about me now recognizing that and acknowledging that and knowing, how does that inform me? How does it move me both?
Yes. I hear that. And do you know what? I just want to take you down in terms of where we're at. So you spoke a little bit about what can cause trauma. I would like us to kind of delve a little bit more about that, because I'm gonna throw in another example. Now, when we're talking about some of the young people that are involved in this this road life, I don't like calling it lifestyle, because for me there's nothing stylish about it. Yeah, so I just won't do it. When they're involved in that road life, trauma can impact the families in the sense of boom, 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 armed police, open the door, boom, 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 boom. An armed raid would do that. Police rocking up in the house, shouting, making up a whole heap of noise, is traumatic. Now, I remember I have spoken to a couple of sisters in the last year, and they were able to relate to the impact that did have on them, because what they said, they've actually had both the same effects actually. And actually what happened is both of them actually were mute for quite a significant period of their life, which is unbelievable. So when we're looking at trauma and you know sometimes we are harming others without even realizing, or you know what I mean, you know how it kind of spreads. So yeah, that is very traumatic. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. And obviously I know one of the things that I'd put, or one of the questions that I have to pose, is how can our trauma as parents affect our children or affect the young people we're around? So imagine that experience or that scenario you've just given me there. Think about it realistically, how many times do you think the parent in that household or the adult in that household would then sit down with that child and say, how are you feeling? How did that impact you? And allow them to speak. We live in cultures where let's just try and push it under the carpet. If we brush it under the carpet, push it away and not acknowledge it, then do you know what I mean? It's not a biggie. It's not something. And we've got to stop doing that. Seriously, we have to stop trying to push things under the carpet, because those young ladies that you're saying that you spoke to, I'm not sure how old they are now, but you can say they're saying that they recognize it's had an impact on them.
Yeah.
If they had got support earlier on in life, it may have lessened the impact that it has on them. They may have been able to process that experience a bit better. So we have to, instead of thinking we're protecting our children by covering things up, we're not. We need to. If something has affected us, whether we've become immune to it or not, if something's affected us, we have to think about, if we have children or there's a child that has seen or witnessed or heard what has happened, we have to start having those conversations with them. So this is why it's all about like becoming trauma informed. And it's not about leaving this conversation feeling like we're going to have a bunch of experts and everyone can sit there and solve some of these issues or unpick trauma and cure it. It's just about being informed enough so that you know you can not treat it but support it.
Yes.
And recognize it and help young people along. So trauma, when I was looking at trauma, and I was thinking, right, okay, we talk about psychological trauma. When we look at physical trauma, we look at an injury sustained to a part of our body that without treatment, it will not be able to repair itself. And it, even then after treatment, it may still be, it may still not work completely.
And it's not going to be the same. And I can totally relate to that, because if you imagine now, so obviously I went through what I went through in 2016. And then last year, stupid me decided, said that my old self going to play football with the kids. And I brought my foot in 3 places, right? And I ended up having, as my son, vibranium implants in my foot. Yeah, so
wow.
I got vibranium in my foot, right? So what it is it really, to when you can actually experience physical trauma after like, you know, emotional trauma and everything else, it is bonkers. It throws trauma in a different perspective, because I'm sitting down, and what unit am I sitting down in? I'm in the hospital and I'm in the trauma unit. I'm like, no way, I'm in the trauma unit. Yeah. And it's crazy, because the reality is trauma is something that things are never the same. Things are never the same. And for me, if I did a presentation not so long ago, and how I kind of summed up trauma was, after trauma, your relationship with everything is different. It changes your relationship with everything, with work, life, people, children. How you view the world is just simply different. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And even if you haven't recognized your trauma. So I coined, our trauma is what has brought us to where we are right now, whether we recognize it or not. Where we are in our position right now, whether that might be work-wise, whether that might be relationships, whatever it might be, it impacts us. And I think this is why there's so many of us subconsciously that are not getting the support, or not processing, or even acknowledging. So if we're not processing it, I've got, like I told you, I've got loads of stats, because I know sometimes there's people that like, oh, what an example. 1 in 3 adults has reported experiencing trauma. That's 1 in 3 that have reported it. What about the ones that haven't reported it? So we're realistically saying nearly every adult has experienced trauma. And then you tell me how many of those have actually got the support for it? How many of those have unpicked it? How many of those? And it's a scary thing, seriously. I can sit here and I can get emotional or passionate about it. It's not an easy thing to do. And I know, obviously, knowing what you've gone through, I know, when you have to sit there and actually...
Oh, nuts.
But it is something that will benefit us. It might not sound like it.
Nadia, 1 second, Nads. Wait there. I'm not sure if your Wi-Fi is working or whether it's my Wi-Fi. Is it your Wi-Fi?
Yeah. At the start of the video, we blame.
Is
So
there any chance you can?
you just don't worry.
Is there any chance you can sit on the router?
Let's see what we.
Yeah, technical difficulties. I think this is one of the things about doing these lives this time. Everybody's online streaming, using it and so forth.
Better.
I think so. I hope so.
Oh my God, please. I actually prayed to the internet gods, but they've probably not received it because of my Wi-Fi, so. Sorry. But yes. Oh.
It's a vast subject, and you know, trauma does leave a quite an imprint on us in terms of how we move forward. But yeah, how else would you say that trauma can affect us?
Right. Is this acknowledged trauma or unacknowledged trauma?
You just break it down. Break it down.
Right. So, acknowledged trauma, it will have mental, physical, and emotional effects on us. So mental health issues that can come as a result of experiencing trauma. Main one is PTSD. And we speak about this, and that's post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what they treated war veterans for. When I tell you, and I'm going to get on my high horse right about now, but when I tell you, when World War II finished, the treatment and the support that veterans received was phenomenal. There were things put in place to support them after the war. We're currently going through a pandemic. The NHS staff are going to be suffering from PTSD. Those NHS staff have children. Those children are going to be impacted. Those children probably already are impacted because they are going to see their parents coming home every day having come out of that environment. They're going to be fearing that their parent, their mom who's a nurse, or their dad who might be a doctor or whatever it might be, they're thinking, right, mom, dad, they're going to work. How do I know they're not going to get COVID?
Yes.
You know what I mean? My dad's a bus driver, and I know he fears, like, look, I say luckily, but they've furloughed some of the staff.
Okay.
But I can see that that's kind of given my dad a little bit of peace of mind, because they say one of the biggest groups of people to have died from COVID or been affected from COVID is bus drivers.
And listen, and I'm with you on that, because we got our WhatsApp group, family WhatsApp group for the London family and stuff. And we was talking about it. One of my cousins is a bus driver, and he's giving us regular updates. And you can hear the distress in the brother's voice. And I was like, bro, just go off work with stress, man. What's wrong with you? And he was like, oh, yeah. I said, go off work with stress, because if you're driving around people and you're in that state, what, you know what I mean? Nah, come off the bus, man.
Yep.
Come off the bus.
And this is it. So, one, it's right. Firstly, PTSD, how are they going to treat that with NHS staff? Two, and I'm sure we're going to come back to this because I'm going off topic. There's so many other mental health conditions that trauma causes. But PTSD, I don't even want to try and guesstimate how much of the young people we work with on a daily basis are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and not getting help, not getting support. I was reading some statistics that say 1 in 13 young people now. When I was trying to unpick statistics on trauma, it's very difficult, because a lot of it will look at how many have been experienced sexual abuse, or how many have a mental health condition, or how many have parents that might have been imprisoned. But ultimately, all of those things then impact trauma.
Yes.
So trauma's a much bigger thing, but 1 in 13 young people have admitted to or spoken about before the age of 18 experiencing at least one traumatic situation.
Yes.
What about those that didn't do the study? What about those that don't speak about it?
Yeah.
What about, let's talk about young people that are, and I know again, this is why this topic's just one of those. We're going to have to do about 6 episodes, you know, Darren.
Easy.
Like, but the young people that are dying on our streets, hold on a minute, they're seeing this, they're not unpacking it. Why aren't they unpacking it? One, because our schools are not investing as much as they need to into trauma-informed practice or care. Yeah. And even then, what are they actually then doing? How is it in policy? How can a young person, if I work in a school and a young person comes in and they're going to have a conversation with me about their friend that got stabbed, what are the safeguarding protocols? How can they talk to me safely about what they experience to unpack their trauma without me being in a position because of safeguarding that I have to go and run tell the police, I have to go and run tell the DSL, and then the DSL takes the police, and this is what I'm saying. So we have to, when it comes to safeguarding, I kind of share Craig's point of view with this. Sorry, Craig Pinkney, I'm just assuming everybody in the world knows him. And I think they do. I think there's probably about 2 people that don't know him in the world. But ultimately, he talks about this in terms of limits with safeguarding and how he had an issue with this. When we're practitioners, we are told that safeguarding is utmost. But when we work with young people that are disadvantaged, we have to try and think about the young person. And if that means that I have to have a conversation with someone and work with the DSL to let them know that, listen, this young person's experienced trauma. If I do not unpick this trauma with them now, it is going to have adverse effects on them. Yes. However, they are conscious, they don't want to talk about it because they're not looking to snitch on anyone. And I hate that term, but they're not looking to snitch on anyone. They're not looking to give us information. And this is it. So we've got these young people that are out there that are just keeping it to themselves, that are not having their trauma actually acknowledged or treated. Can I
cut in for a second? Because you know, a mad thing was, in terms of like trauma-informed schools, going back about 3 years ago, I was supporting a young man who witnessed somebody getting stabbed on the way to school, went into school, said something, yeah, and they called the police, as they're quite rightly supposed to do. Yeah, trauma-informed was, yeah, that the problem is that the police were coming, so they needed someone to support him, arrived there, and they wanted him to speak to the police in the school, right? And in that same room that they're talking about, you know what these modern school buildings are like? They've got like the glass bit where you can see him speaking to the police. Yeah, I said, hell no. Hell no, he ain't doing this right now. Nah, he ain't doing this right now. If you want to sort this out, you can come to the house and that's it. But apart from that, it's not happening. It's not happening right now. I said, what you need to use your brain a bit more, man. Think about what's actually going on. What sort of position does that place a young man in? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yeah. And the other thing, oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the other thing with police coming to speak to children. I've worked in a school where a child saying to me, yo, miss, I got into a fight. Because I retaliated because someone broke my nose the week before, blah, blah, blah. The police are coming into school to talk to me. He didn't even know that legally he should have someone, an adult, present in that conversation, an adult that he trusts, so that he's not going to kind of have a conversation. And this is what I mean. I know that Recall Your Youth kind of message that it's not the school's responsibility, and I totally appreciate that. Because not all school staff can be trained to be able to deal with young people and support young people that are experiencing trauma. But I do believe that they need to be informed that these are some of the young people that you might be facing. We can't tell you about what they're going. The amount of times working in a pastoral department that I've had to look at a teacher, and when they're coming at me with, this person hasn't supplied any work, this person hasn't done this person's attendance is ridiculous, yet because I'm on the pastoral side, I know that there's safeguarding concerns and I can't pass that on to the teacher, but I just have to tell them, just chill, just kind of allow them time. You've got kids coming into school only because they want to get away from home.
Mm-hmm.
Like mentally, how do you expect them to concentrate in a lesson?
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? They've come to school to escape whatever's going on at home, which is traumatic or that they've experienced. But then you want them to concentrate in a lesson, and then because they've got all these emotions, so we're talking about how trauma affects you emotionally, you become angry, withdrawn, distant, fearful, anxious, like all these different emotions that you're going to feel. And you're coming into that classroom and you're only doing it because you don't want to stay at home. Because when you choose between the two, so if that classroom then starts becoming an environment where you're constantly subjected to, oi, why aren't you doing this? How come you haven't put this in place? How come you haven't done X, Y, and Z? Then you then come to a stage where you're like, right, okay, is this child going to go elsewhere? Where else are they going to go? And then that's when we come on to when we were speaking about the article about networking trauma. That's when we get that stage, when we then start looking at people out there that will be that support for that young person that is trying to escape a traumatic situation that they're in.
Yeah.
So
and that's it for me, because you know what, the trauma complexities for a lot of people is still very much unknown. It's still very much an unknown territory. So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, just looking at if we could look at what can we do to build a better relationship with our trauma.
Acknowledge it. Talk about it, acknowledge it, and hopefully treat it. Now, even if you just talk about it, the amount that in itself will help you move forward to acknowledging the impact that it's had on your life. How has that situation that you've been in affected you? And again, we get into difficult territory, and this is why trauma is so it's so frustrating, because again, you imagine a young person that might be encountering sexual abuse at home. They don't want to talk about it because the perpetrator is a family member. The perpetrator is somebody that they trust. And if they talk about it, then that person that they trust, because most young people that encounter sexual abuse, they know the abuser. So that person that they trust, they don't want anything to happen to them, or they're scared of them. So they can't talk. So they just deal with the trauma. And then by the time they get to an age where legally they've got their own grounds to stand on, it just becomes, you know what, allow it, it's happened now, let's just kind of so remove, and that's it. And
it just becomes part of them, unbalances them, and it just becomes their normal, but because there's no safe, brave spaces for them to unpick, understand, and process this trauma, this is where the difficulty lies.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, we talk about safe spaces and brave spaces, and I think we've got to signpost, and we talk about like people have got to work together. I'm not sitting here claiming to be an expert in working with someone with trauma. This is just about making people aware and giving that information. But young people, they want someone they can trust. Like, I talk about mental health and counselling, and the reason that a lot of young people would say that counselling hasn't helped for them is because they're going into a room with an adult that they don't have a relationship with. They're expecting that adult to solve all their problems. Now, there's a lot of people that are doing therapy, and the way that therapy works is different to counselling. I've experienced counselling myself, and listen, I'd swear by it. It was so helpful for me to unpick. But we're living with an era of young people that do not want to sit and talk about their problems to someone they know, let alone someone they don't know. Exactly. So if we don't build better relationships with our children, then it is going to be somebody else that they talk to, or they are going to just keep it hidden under the carpet, or they are going to become exploited because they are vulnerable, because they are experiencing emotional difficulties, because their mental health has clearly been impacted and somebody has picked up on that. Because again, as we've said, the people out there that are exploiting these young people, it's like they train themselves to recognize that.
They're good, you know, they're talented. Let me tell you something.
Horrible.
If some of these groomers could actually understand and say a theory behind it, they're dropping some serious social science to allow that to happen, you know, to get young people groomed. Do you
Yes.
know? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Recall Youth just put something up there about free counselling services. So we've got people like Mind, Young Minds, the Samaritans. Again, these are great, and parents can contact them. As a parent, you can contact the NSPCC and you can actually have a conversation. If you think your child is experiencing trauma and you don't know where to start or what to do, and it's not just trauma, it's any topic, any issue that your child may be experiencing, and you want to talk to someone in a confidential environment, then you can do that with NSPCC, Mind, Young Minds.
And that's great, because the reality is that some of our children may not be up for speaking to people around the issues of trauma, but it's like you could still seek support on how you can support your child with trauma. Yes. And that's the key bit. So in terms of last week when we were speaking, I was speaking with Vanika around secure base. Yeah, and being able to getting him to understand, you know what, it's fine. Here is safe. Here is the safest place on earth. Yeah, nothing can come in and trouble you. Yeah, but if there's any problems, you can come and tell us. You can come and tell us. We're here, whether it's good, bad. What we got to understand that is there's certain things that will push them away, and that will be the barking, the shouting, the screw face, the this, the that, some of the traditional methods that may have been used as we were growing. Do you know what I mean? So again,
like I said, the parenting element, out of all the jobs I've done in my life, the most difficult job has been parenting. Because you are responsible for this other person, but yet we are still people. So as parents, we still experience our own things, and then you've got a child that you need to realize that there's a knock-on effect. So again, like if we look at trauma that isn't unpicked or expressed, then it can be hidden by substance misuse issues. So you got people that are gonna just use substances, and that's just gonna help them get through the day. But then
and you know,
that's affecting their children.
And as far as they're concerned, they're good because they're managing it through that way. And it's crazy, because I remember working with a young girl who experienced quite a lot of stuff, multiple layers of trauma. And one of the things is that you know, that one of the incidences only happened a matter of months before, and there was this massive expectation around the professionals around the table that she must do her education. She must do her education. I'm like, I was the only one that stood up for her and said, leave her alone. Yeah. Leave her alone, allow her, because the reality is she needs a little break. She's 17, and what, she needs that little bit of time off, because quite frankly, it's not unheard of for us, if we were to go through something traumatic, to take a good 6 months off. So do you know what I mean? Why for a child who who's unable to navigate themselves and may be looking and may have very harmful ways of seeking to be soothed, do you know what I mean? So really, we need to consider that and say, you know what, sometimes we've got to be realistic in terms of what our expectations are with children. Allow them.
I think even in the decisions that we make, like again, I worked in when I was head of year 11, I had a young lady that about a week before she was due to start her first GCSE, her mother passed away. Now, I don't even want to imagine how that will impact me as an adult, but she came back and she did her GCSEs, and obviously we wrote in to the exam boards to let them know this is the situation, and we know that they may take that into consideration. You would hope they would. But I think the worrying thing for me is when I was having conversations with her, her dad didn't want her to get any counselling. Her dad didn't want her to speak to somebody about her bereavement or what she was experiencing, because she appears to be a strong-minded young lady. She appears to be okay. She doesn't need to process it. But then when you think about a scenario like that, how many children out there are going to want to speak to their mom or dad, like whichever parent's still left? They're not going to want to speak to them about the death of the other parent because they don't want their parent to feel bad. So it's,
yes,
we've got to allow our children to be children.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's the thing, because you know what, when you go through a level of like family trauma like that, yeah, the kids with the children without even realizing, then can sometimes become your own carers, yeah, and they're looking out for you, yeah, they're looking out for you, so they're starting to protect you, yeah, so they're not telling you certain stuff, and they're trying to hold it themselves because they're watching your face and they're thinking, you know what, it's not a bad day. They look happy. They look happy today. I won't tell them that I'm feeling sad today. Do you know what I mean? And it's crazy. It's crazy. So sometimes people are in traumatized, not living in traumatized situations. Do you know what I mean? And not everybody's had that even started that journey of healing and putting context.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Definitely
crazy. But yes. All right then. So, I think it's time, yeah, for us to look at, because this topic's very deep. And what I want to also say is that today is kind of the start of the next few weeks where we're looking at the issues around mental health. All right. Is it next week? Is Mental Health Week, Awareness Week? I believe
in May.
Yes. So
May.
Yeah. So what I'm going to look at is, in terms of parenting, right? How can parents' trauma affect their children?
Right. Our children are smarter than we think, and they pick up on our emotions. So, imagine a parent who is, maybe they've recognized their trauma, but they're not currently getting support because, let's be honest, the waiting lists for any support for your mental health these days are quite long. Yeah. So in the immediate effects of the trauma, they have to try and kind of piece it together themselves. This is resulting in their mental health being impacted. They might go through a bout of depression. They're feeling really low in mood. They're constantly crying. They don't really want to get up. They don't want to do anything. They're not eating properly. Your kids are picking up on this.
Yes.
Your kids are processing every single last bit of that. Sometimes that then makes us try and safeguard our kids. So let's say you develop anxiety as a result of trauma that you've experienced.
Yes.
Then your worries are then going to be imposed on your child. And because you now have some fears that you haven't processed or you haven't talked about or you don't quite understand or you don't even realize that you have these fears, you automatically start becoming more protective of your children. And there's like that change in behavior. All of a sudden your children are looking, thinking, well, hold on a minute, what's happened? What have I done? Like, you look at, again, unprocessed trauma in an adult. If they then turn to, and they do the whole, like a lot of us do in a lot of the BAME communities out there, is under the carpet. You're stronger than that. You're bigger than that. We've been through worse. Let's just move. That then, as we said, can turn into substance misuse. And then your child's around that. So your child's then around a parent that is drinking excessively to kind of mask whatever they're going through, or is smoking excessively to hide their feelings and to numb the pain. And then that becomes your child then thinking, well, that's how we process it. That's how we process information. If I go to, and we look at domestic violence, and I'm aware of young men that have experienced and witnessed their parents having a very volatile and physically abusive relationship, and then have gone into a relationship and vowed that they would never be that person, but because the trauma that they experience has never been unpicked, they become that person because they're angry, because they've got all these emotions that they can't control, because they've learned a certain behavior, they've picked up a certain coping strategy. This is how I deal with it. I don't talk to people. And then if we go into mental health and men, and you and me were having this conversation, men aren't allowed to cry. You're not allowed to have a problem. Listen, something happens to you, just man up. Yeah. Man up. Don't kind of, do you know what I mean? Just get over it, deal with it. So is it surprising that 78% of suicides are attributed to men over the age of 16, under the age of 50? Do you know what I mean? Because they don't get to process that. They don't get to talk about it, because then there's this fear and there's this stigma. And this is, we're not saying that put it all out there in the table, but at the same time we're saying what we got to do is recognize it exists. It is there. It is there more than we probably want it to be. And if we look at our young generation now, if we don't unpick their traumas, they're going to become parents that are then going to pass on their trauma to their kids, and then their kids and their kids. So somewhere along the line, we have to start working with young people so that they can build healthier relationships with their trauma. They can unpick it in safe spaces. They can know that it's okay to feel the way that they do, and know that they've got safe people around them that will listen to them, not, as you said, not all shout and bark at them, that will listen to them and allow them to just kind of break down what they're feeling without judgment. Like, our kids need consequences. Our kids need us as parents to be able to tell them what's right from wrong. But there's sometimes our kids just need us to listen. That's all they need.
And it's crazy because, like, for when parents who have, say, gone through a trauma as a parent and have to continue parenting, unfortunately, especially if it's like a death or something, within the community, there's a whole culture. It's a whole 9-night leading up to the 9-night, the funeral, and everything else, whereby, do you know what, drink this, smoke this, eat that, drink this, smoke that, and that's the way you deal with it. So in that time, you know, it's very easy to slip back into habits that you may not even had, or fall back into those habits unhealthily, because it doesn't take long to drop into habits. You know what I mean? So but this is especially the case with, like, young people, because, boy, the amount of young people that are drinking heavy and they're beating that juice because of they've been through something, and for them that's their release. For them, that's their coping strategy. For them, that's them being resilient. Do you know what I mean? Because they have to man up and just hold it. There's nowhere to let it out.
And then we've said it before, hurt people will go and hurt people. Yeah. So they've got all this anger and these emotions, and they can't talk to anyone about it because either they don't have an adult in their life that they feel they trust, or that they can safely unpick it with. They don't have, we had the Maslow hierarchy of needs, they don't have that sense of belonging. They don't feel that they belong anywhere enough for them to be able to talk about it. And if their sense of belonging is with their street family, then they're not going to talk about it, because the young people don't sit there and say, you know what, I'm so upset. And some do, don't get me wrong. I have been at funerals and I have seen young people actually letting out their emotions. But then what happens? What happens after that? Once we've seen them let out that emotion, what do we do? I'm not gonna, like, part of Mind Our Mentalities was built off a young person that lost their life too early. And I worked with him when he was 8, and it was him and this other lad. And every time I saw them together between the age of 8 all the way up until 16, 17, it was always them two lads. So I knew they were tight. When this young lad died, whether we're going to call it suicide or we're going to call it intoxication, like substance abuse, whatever led to it, I check up on his friend.
Yeah.
Because how could I know for a fact that he is going to be impacted by what happened? Because he then lost another 2 young men that were in his life that year. So this young person's been affected by all these other young people around him dying. He's going to experience trauma, and it might be acute trauma.
Yeah.
If he gets support, if he's got a healthy relationship with his parents, if he's got a support network or people he can talk to, if he's got the self-confidence within himself to allow his emotions to come out. But if he hasn't got any of them things, then that trauma is just gonna just build, that snowball's just gonna keep rolling and rolling and rolling until it's something that he can't actually process and he can't deal with.
Because one of the things I'm aware of from speaking to some parents here, one of their friends, as say for example, being killed and stuff, how can they so their child's friend has been killed or died or something like that, yeah, what can they do? Because they struggle to approach them, they struggle to initiate conversation, they struggle because they know they're going through the pain. What sort of do you recommend?
See, I would normally say when you've got a young person or a child that is resistant to you, I'd normally recommend something like a letter. And I know it might sound like a bit basic, but if I was that parent and it's my son who's seen his friend get killed, and whenever I try to let's say, like, I can't have conversations with him, as a parent, I have to, because if I don't, that's going to affect my child.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hard as a parent to just kind of watch your child. Think about, again, physical ailments and health issues, to watch your child experiencing something and you can't take away that pain, then what? Oh.
Yes.
So I would advise that they make it known to their child that you are ready to create a safe space, whether you've had a brilliant relationship with them or not, whether you and them talk regularly or not. You need to make it known to them that, listen, I can only imagine what you're going through. I really want to help you, and I really hope that you find it in yourself to be able to talk to me. But if not, here are some other agencies you can talk to. If that child is in school or is in education, I would advise that the parents reach out to whoever the DSL is, the Deputy Safeguarding Lead, so that they are aware of the effects, if they've got a good relationship with them. That you can put them again at heart. The problem, young people very often don't reach out to other organisations. So if we're talking about a strong young black man that's not going to admit that anything's phasing him, is he really going to call Mind if I give him their number? No. But this is why youth work becomes vital, because then I know that if he was in a youth organisation, or if he was around somebody, a professional, a practitioner, then they might be able to encourage him to get the support. Because sometimes young people need to be accountable to someone else. So if you've got a young person that you work with and you know they've gone through something, and then the parent can reach out, and that's why places like this isn't to plug you, but Epiphany people, that's why it's vital for work like that. Because if you're working with the parents, then the parents can say, well, you know what, hold up a second, I don't feel like I can break through with my son, but how about you try? Could you try and have a conversation with him? Yeah, could you just try and talk to him, or let them put them in the direction of someone that may have experienced a similar thing, so that, because that sense of knowing that someone else has gone through, and I think this is why lived experience practitioners are now doing so well. It's really important to remember that just because you've lived the experience, that doesn't mean you're an expert. We got to remember Craig's science of youth work. But if you are a lived experience practitioner and you've got really good youth skills and skills to develop relationships with young people, then young people will just be drawn to you and feel that ability. And it might take, I would say to that parent, it's not going to happen like that. Yes. But as long as you have acknowledged his trauma for him, and you carry on doing everything you can as a parent to give him opportunities to unpick what he's feeling, then that in itself is something. That in itself is you kind of showing that support.
Can I again, because we're likely to get lock off. Are you okay to come back in a bit?
Yeah, okay. Not a problem.
All right then. So what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to end the live and start back again, guys. Yeah, and then I'll summarize these excellent points that you've just rose. You know what I mean? So guys, join us. I'm gonna end this live because they're gonna cut us off in a second. All right, but we're gonna be right back. All right.
In a bit.